it's interesting and also scary at the same time to see how quickly all of this is developing.
Yeah.
And I like even just with my own research, right? The most recent article that I'm quoting in my research was literally posted 3 weeks ago. I
Exactly.
mean, literally,
Yep.
and the oldest paper is like from 7 years ago. I mean, like, what other field can you even name? I can't name one that was developing that quickly, and maybe I didn't look at other fields as closely, right?
You're right. You're
I
100%
don't
right.
know. I've never seen something like that where it's like, "Oh, I'm basing this on something that was talked about 2 weeks ago."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think about some of the biggest components of generative AI, agentic AI, things like MCP, things like A2A, all of that stuff really didn't exist like the beginning of last year. And now it's like cornerstones of this entire field. And I mean, and that's why I get the most excited about AI. Believe it or not, I was talking about AI before it was cool. So my senior thesis was on augmenting humans with artificial intelligence because I'd always been a technology nerd. I've always been into science, and artificial intelligence was just one of those things that was interesting to me. When I was a kid, I thought I was going to build Skynet, obviously, but in the good way, not the destroy the entire world way. I felt like once this technology came to the forefront, right? I was using generative. If I showed you some of the stuff I generated early on, you would laugh, but I keep that stuff almost like my own museum of how things have progressed. And then obviously when GPT, I think it was either 3 or 3.5 came out, and that was kind of like this watershed moment that changed the entire world. And everyone started to developing their own apps. They started creating their own technologies. And now the genie's kind of like out of the bottle. And now it's like a cornerstone of civilization, right? This sounds a bit dramatic, but I do believe that this is a bigger watershed moment than the Industrial Revolution. This is bigger than the dawn of the internet. This is something that's going to change the face of humanity in ways that we can't even fathom yet.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I had on, I think, a mutual friend, Jim Lawler,
Yeah. Yeah.
former director of UMD division for the CIA, right?
Mhm.
And I was talking to him, and it kind of from obviously I wasn't even born at the time, right? But from what I know from when America was developing the first nuclear bombs, it kind of has that same feeling to it, right? Where we're kind of in an arms race to an
Yeah.
extent, where the country that gets this thing under control and really develops it first is going to just wipe the floor with everyone else, and there will be a show of force, as soon as we get to a level that, is viable of showing and whatnot, there's a show of force. And then everyone else is like, I'm behind by X amount of years, right? And hopefully, obviously I would want America to be on top of that thing, right? But it has that same feeling where, it's almost like the US government, to some extent, in some dark corner, right, is just saying, you have an unlimited budget. We're going to have all these research institutions all over the place, researching this thing at great lengths. We're going to have, XAI, right? Go and build a million GPU supercluster, whatever they're calling it, right? I mean, to even think of that 5 years ago, there's something wrong with you if you're thinking about that 5 years ago, like,
Or you're a genius.
yeah, hence Elon Musk. But it has that same feeling. Maybe I'm alone with it, but it has
No.
that same feeling where we're on the precipice of something that's going to change the entire trajectory of everything.
No, I mean, it's kind of like the opposite ends of the spectrum is that AI is going to solve everything and everybody doesn't have to work anymore because all the machines are doing our work and we just get to have fun and be with our loved ones. Or it's going to be the apocalypse and we're going to be kind of like at the whim of our AI overlord. So it's kind of like, the reality is probably going to land somewhere in the middle. I think we're starting to put a lot of the guardrails in place that I think we need. You were talking about legislation a little bit ago, and so I got to contribute. So it was myself, OWASP, and I was on the behalf of the SANS Institute, working with some folks developing what we believe to be the security standard for the EU AI Act, which is they're probably the front runners when it comes to legislation for artificial intelligence right now. But yeah, that stuff is starting to begin, and there's early talks in the United States, whether you're talking about the DoD. I've been having a lot of conversations with leaders in the DoD about how they're thinking about framing artificial intelligence for operations. The AI plan for the United States just came out. So that this is telling you that the right folks are thinking about how do you architect the world that is AI. And I'm just hoping that number one, everyone takes it seriously, but then number two, that we constantly iterate on like, what does it mean to be on the right side of artificial intelligence as it develops?
Yeah, no, that's a great question too. What it means to be on the right side of it. Like, well, what's the right side, right? Because I had on someone previously, and he kind of outlined it pretty perfectly because he was developing exploits to get around things that the U.S. military was doing in the theater of war right over in Afghanistan and whatnot. And I immediately felt like I shouldn't have him on the podcast. I wanted to end it right there, right? It's just was weird. But, he explained it like, to Americans, in America, yeah, you look like the good guy 9 times, 9.9 times out of 10, like you're not going to be convinced that you're on the bad side, right? But to an enemy, you're the bad guy, right? So
100%.
who's
Yeah.
who's actually right? It's usually somewhere in the middle. There's a gray area, right? And he kind of described it how he likes to work in that gray area. I feel like it was a little on the wrong side, but whatever, you know.
So, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a huge narrative nerd. I'm a huge film buff. I'm addicted to this stuff. Somebody said something just about villains in general that stuck with me, and so I use it almost as a framework. Is that 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, a villain doesn't necessarily see themselves as a villain. And so when I'm watching movies and I see that this villain knows they're a villain, I'm like, that's not realistic. But when you have a villain like, say, Thanos, right, from Marvel, he felt like he was doing the right thing. He was the villain to everybody. He was basically the villain to the entire universe. But from his perspective, he was doing all the right things. And I think that's how you create really good villains. But I think there's a little bit of truth to that fiction.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It takes me back to like the Joker in the Batman series, right? Where he never thought that he was the villain, for
Right.
sure. He
Yeah.
just thought that he was causing a little bit of chaos to get some change, right? Not that he was necessarily the villain.
Right. Yeah. He saw society as something that needed to be changed. And he was kind of like teaching everybody a lesson. That's why he interrupted the party and he was kind of going through this whole monologue. And he burnt the money because we were tied to our physical possessions and things like that. So I mean, that's when you write a really good character, is when you have that dichotomy of what it means to be a human being.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's just it's fascinating, How do you find the time become so specialized and such an expert in everything that you do, everything that you've done throughout your career, right? I mean, like, I feel like you don't just dabble. I feel like you go, head first into these topics, into these areas that maybe there's not a whole lot of experts in, right? And you just submerge yourself in this information, you absorb it all, and you become, one of the experts that are talking on it, right? I mean, like, I didn't even know that there was an EU act going on, right? That there's discussions, right? Because I'm not even in that
Yeah.
conversation,
Right.
But how in the world do you even find the time? Because you got several kids,
And I got
right?
three
I mean,
daughters.
you're running a business, you're doing all these other things. How do you
Yeah.
do it?